Okay, hello, I'm Rob, and talking about copywriting for developers. And first off, somebody might be saying, what is copywriting? Very simply, it's using words to sell. It's salesmanship in print. And really anything that you're trying to convince somebody of, that's really what you're doing. So, it had nothing to do with copyrights and intellectual property, if anyone thought that was what the topic was. Okay. Now, why should you care about this? Because a lot of times, if you're making an app, if you're trying to sell your app, if you're trying to get that out there, you need to convey to that user or your prospective user why they want to use your app. What is it to them? How is it going to make their life better? Now, some people may be saying, I'm not really a writer, I don't like to write, I'm not good at writing. Well, this is not about literary style and prose. It's not about anything so fancy. It's really about just getting across the message of what you do. David Ogilvy, a famous copywriter, as he said, you want to remember, you want people to buy your product, not admire your penmanship. And that's really what we're talking about here. So, you may wonder, where do I start? So I have a product, I have my app, what's the first thing I need to do? First thing you need to do is you need to listen. You need to listen to the market and listen to what pains the user has. What is the problem? Maybe you developed your app because you're scratching your own itch, and so what was the pain that you had? Or what is the pain that you hear people talking about that drove you to do that? You need to be listening to that. And nowadays we have it a lot easier because we can just do it online. A lot of great places to do customer research would be things like Amazon reviews. Now, if you're looking at Amazon reviews, what's very important, don't look at 1 star, don't look at 5 star, because those are extremes, they're not going to tell you anything. Because 1 star is usually complaining about some nonsense, and 5 star is probably a friend of the person. But look at the 2 to 3 stars and see what somebody's saying is missing. What are they looking for in that? Quora is another great place. Reddit. Obviously, if you already have a product, surveys, asking your existing customers, what is it that brought them to your product? What is it that makes them interested in it? Any sort of Facebook groups, blog comments, if there's things that your audience is reading. I'll tell you, any of the mainstream copywriters out there, they're reading things like Weekly World News and National Enquirer and People Magazine because they know that's what their market, if they're writing to the standard American, that's what the market is and that's what they're reading. So when you start, first thing you need to do is you need to know what you want your reader to do. What is the action that you're looking for? Because you can only have one action. If it's going to be something like, maybe for example, you just want an email address for them to opt in. So that needs to be the focus of what you're doing. If it's to get the sale, then that's the sale. That's what you're doing. But if you have multiple things, your reader is going to get confused, they're going to get overwhelmed, and it's going to lead to no decision. So make sure before you start writing anything that you know what you're looking to achieve. Because if you don't know, your reader isn't going to know. Now, it's also important, and especially with technical people, you need to be sure to speak in benefits and not in features. You need to speak to what is it that's going to make the difference to the customer. What are they going to understand, and how is that going to translate to them? A good example is when Apple first announced the iPod, they didn't say it's 5 gigabytes, they said it's 1,000 songs in your pocket. Because that's something people can understand and something people can relate to. So you want to do that. A good way to test that is read through your copy, and at the end of each sentence, ask the question, so what? Because that's what the reader is going to be doing. And make sure that in there you are answering that question for the reader. Also, if you're going through, which means. Make sure if you're saying something, you're explaining what that means, because it's not going to necessarily mean anything. Another important thing is that you can find your unique item. even if it's not something that is necessarily unique to you, if you're the first one to claim it, it's yours. If you've seen Mad Men, they would talk about the Lucky Strike, it's toasted. Saying that the tobacco is toasted. And there's this ad for Schlitz Beer that Claude Hopkins, very famous advertising, copywriting man, came up with, and he was meeting with them and was saying to them like about their beer. They're telling about the process and about the purity and bringing it into this room. And he goes to them, well, why aren't you telling the customers about this? And they go, because every company is doing it. But they were the first ones, and their beer went from number 5 in America to number 1, just by telling the process of how it's being made. So once you know what you want, once you have that decided, you're going, the next thing is the headline. You need to get the person's attention. And we have this one here, Max Sackheim, it's, do you make these mistakes in English? This one ran for many years, I think something like 10, 20 years. They sold millions of dollars worth of this course on English, and this headline has been ripped off by copywriters ever since. And Joe Sugarman, who's actually the creator of the blue blocker sunglasses, if you're familiar, he says that the headline has one purpose, and that's it. It's to get the reader to go to the next line. The next line, all it's doing is to get them to keep going. So that's what you just need to do. Kind of like they say, the slippery slope. Just look at it, that your one line is going to get them to go to the next. That's what you need to do. I mean, if you look at sites like BuzzFeed, Upworthy, their writers are writing 25 headlines for every article that they write before it's going out to determine which is going to be the best one. So the headlines, so here's another one. Are you haunted by the ghosts of your social mistakes? So if you did show up to the date with the wedding dress on, so this one was actually used, they had like 100,000 copies of this etiquette book that they were trying to get rid of, and they was not selling at all, and that headline got it to go. So very important that you capture somebody's attention, especially, I mean, online, there's so many distractions, there's so much stuff. You need to make sure to get the reader to stop and pay attention to what you have to say. Because if you can't get their attention, you're not going to get anything else. Now, there's 3 key areas when it comes to trying to influence people and persuasion. Now, this can really apply to anything you're doing. I mean, any sort of writing, it's all the same. I mean, if you're trying to make a persuasive argument, if you're trying to convince your boss to let you have a day off, you need to make the same type of points. And there's a few things that we can do when we're writing to customers. One is encourage people's dreams. That's why everyone has their dreams, and we need to encourage that and show them how this product is going to move them forward towards that. The other is validate their feelings. I mean, that would be something like, say, it's a scheduling app. Acknowledge the fact that we're all very busy. It's understandable that you're a busy person, and this is why you need something like this. Take the blame away from somebody and transfer the blame and fault. And you see this all the time in advertisements, weight loss drugs, things like that. That's why they say, if you have trouble losing weight, it may not be your fault, because they're taking the transfer of the blame away from the prospect. So that's something you definitely want to keep in mind. You want to validate the feelings and move them forward. Now, I know it's become a bit of a buzzword these days, everyone talking about story and power, but it is actually very powerful to use story in your thing. And it can come into play in several different ways. One is maybe giving the story of how the product came to be, or giving the story of a user and how their life is better. Take the story from the journey from where it started, when somebody first came out with something, to where it went next. This ad was a Wall Street Journal ad, and it says, on a beautiful late spring afternoon, 25 years ago, 2 young men graduated from college. Skips ahead. They recently returned to college after their 25th reunion. They were very much alike. Skip a few more lines. They worked for the same company. There was one difference. One was the manager of a small department, the other was the president. And that went on to sell about $2 billion worth of Wall Street Journal subscriptions. So there's definitely a lot of power in it. And really, I mean, a simple formula you can use when it comes to copywriting is the character, that's going to be you or the customer before the problem, before the solution exists. Your setting is going to be the industry or the place where the problem exists. Conflict. I mean, what is the core thing? What are you going to solve for them? And then the resolution is very much what your solution is. Now, some think you'll ask about writer's block, or if you have trouble coming up with it. A couple of things you can do is, one, if you're not sure, pretend that you're describing your product to a friend. I mean, if somebody went up to you this evening and said, tell me about your app, that's all you need to do. I mean, you may even want to record yourself talking about it and go and listen back, and that's the type of stuff you should be telling to your prospect and your readers. I mean, you also may look at your product and say, why shouldn't somebody buy this? Look at the negative, why wouldn't somebody? And make sure that you're answering those questions as well. And also, look at how your competitors are selling the product and how you can position that as well. Now, another important thing is they tell you anything about how you actually can buy it, where to buy it. They just say it's for sale, but no information on how to actually do it. Make sure you're asking for the sale, and make sure the customer knows how they actually buy that. Whether it's they're clicking a button, whether they're picking up the phone, make sure they know what step they need to take. And they have a template here kind of going through just what the process is. They said, it's kind of getting their attention. You want to focus on the reader. This isn't about you, it's about your reader and how their life is going to be better. Encourage the dreams, validate the feelings, and transfer blame and fault. Describe it to a friend. Take the reader on a journey and ask them for the sale. Make sure and you know how to do it. Okay, that is my site, Robert Williger, and you can find me most places at Robert Williger. I put together some other copywriting resources, robertwilliger.com/Orlando, if anyone wants to check out. And any questions?
Questions, really good. You're too quiet today.
What kind of challenges have you had in copywriting? Like you do this professionally, correct?
But yes.
Yeah. So what's been your biggest challenge, I guess?
Biggest challenge would be really trying to kind of find the market, narrow down who is the user, and knowing what that market is and understanding the market, because it could be a product that I'm not necessarily a customer of, and that's really where the research has to come in, so that's probably the biggest thing. Because I mean, if it's a good product, the product should be able to sell itself. I mean, you should be able to listen to the person who made it if they can tell you about it, and that should really, do it, but that's probably the hardest part. Yes?
What are the top 3 best things about being a copywriter, and which one will surprise you most?
Okay, the top 3. Well, it's it's writing, but you don't need to be a really good writer. So that's probably the most surprising, is that it is not something for people who are into literature and fine writing. That is not that. Let's see, 2 other things. Fun. I mean, it's great just getting to see all these, getting familiar with different products and seeing different things out there and the variety of stuff. And I don't know, I just kind of like figuring. I've always kind of liked persuasion and, knowing how people think and how, people make decisions.
If people are interested in refining their copywriting technique, is there any resources you would suggest for them to maybe test their headlines or something to improve and find the market?
Yes, I mean, as far as refining, in the resource I have a couple of links of some good sites to Copy Hackers is probably one of the best sites for copywriting information if you're looking at the software market. It's very focused on that. HubSpot has a headline generator tester as far as that. So I mean, you definitely do want to test things and look through it. So that would be what I'd say. Yes.
Have you been doing this for more than 10 years?
Yes.
What's been the biggest change in the last 10 years in terms of how you would approach whatever you're copywriting?
I think that the biggest thing is going to be sometimes the length of stuff. Is that you need to really, some stuff needs to be shorter these days. People don't have the same attention span. I mean, they'll read long copy, but a lot of stuff you need to be able to get it into a lot fewer words. Whereas before, I mean, they would, 10, 20 page magalogs, they call them. And you'll see them sometimes, but now it needs to be a lot shorter.
Do you ever, I'll ask you later.
Thank you.